one other thing I want to tease out here
Yeah.
is sort of like the mindset of an entrepreneur, right? And this is going back to what we're talking about earlier, is how I felt like you're a little bit of a different pre-med,
Yeah.
because I feel like pre-med has its own challenges. There's very much like a cut and dry, like, path that you follow, and you're sort of like in this lane. And
Yeah.
entrepreneurship, like, could you just talk a little bit about this mindset of like
Yeah.
being in this space, like you're pitching to these investors, your students? That must have been a little bit of like, man,
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm actually know what I'm talking about. There's a lot of like just putting yourself out there,
Yeah.
being comfortable, being uncomfortable type thing. I just wanted to kind of tease that out, and hear more about that from you, and then sort of like ask, what would you recommend pre-meds who have an interest in this sort of be thinking about? What sort of personal attributes do they want to cultivate? Just things like that. I know it's a lot of
Yeah.
questions there, but like,
Yeah. No, I'm happy to talk about those things. And
yeah,
um,
because it's different,
I was
right?
I
From the
was also
pre-med
think
journey, it's
yeah,
different.
I was
Go
also
ahead.
thinking maybe like a useful experience of just putting like your major to good use and that stuff. We can talk a little bit about the vaccine stuff. Like
Yeah,
I
yeah,
was in the trial and whatnot, so
yeah, yeah.
I can like cover some of that. It's very, very fascinating.
I saw that.
But I would say on the first thing, I'm actually very averse to the word entrepreneurship. I hardly use it. I almost I've started to try to train myself not to use it, because I think it's become a buzzword in the vernacular for people that actually is kind of meaningless. Like, like people don't, it is used so often, whether you're the person starting, Instagram, or you're the guy on TikTok who's selling, gold chains. Oh,
Right.
I'm an entrepreneur. Like it doesn't do it justice. An entrepreneur, in my mind, conjures an image of a very kind of self possessed and like self-centered approach to building value.
Mm,
It's like we call Mark Zuckerberg a famous entrepreneur, right?
yeah.
But then it's just all about Mark, you know?
Mm,
It's not about the amazing company he's built and the amazing people who have been on that ride with him.
got it.
And maybe that's applicable in technology and in traditional technology.
Okay.
But when you're working in drug discovery and development, I'll use that as an area.
Yeah.
You're bringing value to patients. Patients are the end goal. Can you make a difference for patients? And so you assuming the role of like, I'm the entrepreneur. It's very like self-prophetic. Like you feel
Yeah.
like you're charging the hill, right? And the way where I learned that actually is through my boss, this guy Jake Van Naarden, who's class of '06.
Mhm.
He and the CEO of that company, Josh Blinker, who's class of '94, they
Wow.
sold the company that I now work for called Loxo Oncology for $8 billion. It's a huge exit. They're probably the most successful entrepreneurs ever to graduate from Princeton.
Wow.
But I asked him that question, said, do you feel like an entrepreneur? He
Mm,
said, no, that's a wrong word to be used in our world, because in the end, this is a team sport. You need a lot of people to do this, and all the voices around the table are contributing to get this drug to patient. And ultimately, it's about the patient. So it shouldn't be about me and what I did. So I've always viewed it from that lens. And I think I agree with you. The mentality can be there that you put yourself out there. You need to be able to absorb massive amount of risk. You need to be able to think in advance. You need
right.
to be able to do all of these things. But the word is something that I've started to reject. And I think that it's, it can be overplayed. I also believe that, and I'm a big believer of this, coming out of college, I remember some mentors of mine asked, like, at school, like, oh, so, when are you going to start the company? Like, are you going to go run a company now? Like, I said, no chance,
Mm,
no chance. I do not nearly know enough. And I'm not trying to be like, play some humility card or something. Literally, this is an incredibly complex industry. For the first 6 months of my job, I literally was like, what am I doing?
yeah.
Like, I do not understand this at all. Okay. this is a field of 20 different disciplines. And just to give you a feel of some of these disciplines.
Yeah, please.
Clinical development. How do you power a clinical trial? How do you run a clinical trial? It's crazy. You don't learn this in school.
No,
right?
not at all.
Okay, structural biology. How do I know what the protein looks like? Medicinal chemistry, regulatory affairs, chemistry, manufacturing and controls. It's like endless, right?
Yeah.
And I'm looking at this like, what is happening here? So I have like really dug into the mindset that early in my career, and I hope this is relevant for other people.
Yeah.
We live in a world where now when you go on LinkedIn, you scroll and you see everybody's starting something or doing something, and that's great. And there's a lot of like American entrepreneur mindset, and capitalism is a strong motivator, right?
Yeah.
But you cannot downplay the benefit of getting trained well and learning like the real way of doing this properly. And so I'm committed early in my career. I want to learn. I don't want to try to be the boss. I don't want to do that. I just want to understand how to do this. And then when I'm ready to take the leap, I'll take the leap. But I'll take it on an informed basis, not just hazard like, okay, I'm going to just go and do it, see what happens. Because this is not, hey, I'm getting, I'm creating an app to walk your dog or whatever. It's putting a real substance into somebody's body who's dying of a disease.
Yes.
And you cannot take that. You have to take it seriously. And that seriousness only comes from being trained in a serious way.
Right.
So that's where I stand on that. I don't know if I've answered your question.
No, you absolutely did. Bro, I think that's a fascinating, very nuanced take and important for people to hear. And also, it's sort of, I love what you said about not being self-centered, right? Because, and I think that will be music to a lot of pre-meds ears, because we think we're like, oh, salt of the earth, like nicest people on the earth. They're like, oh, we hate money and like business and all that, right? But you talked about the triangle, like business, medicine, science, right?
Yeah.
You're just talking about using business to help other people, and it's not all about me. So that's a really wonderful idea that you just put out there, that I really, really appreciate, and hope people can find some value to, as well, bro. And then maybe also like, and this goes back to why we said biotech firms aren't on Shark Tank, right? It might be a little bit of a different space than the regular entrepreneur space, where there's like, you don't really need that scientific basis for all those other things necessarily, right? But once you get into the scientific space, might not be a good idea to start a company at age 22 with something that you're trying to inject into people, right? So this is a great distinction for me. It's interesting for me to hear about like science entrepreneurship and then non-science entrepreneurship, right?
Yeah, I think it's a huge difference. And I'll give you the example of like, you've heard of that company Theranos. And
I have not heard of them.
What about Elizabeth Holmes? Have you heard of her?
I'm not
she was
sure,
a Stanford dropout who wanted to, it's a huge famous story. She's like going to jail now, but she wanted to start a diagnostics company that from a pinprick of blood, I can tell every disease that you have or had.
Oh, and I may have heard of that.
You've probably heard of her. That is an example of when things go wrong, right? And I think there's, I'm not trying to feed into the mindset that young people can't be impactful in this industry and that the curve is not changing, because I really hope it is.
Yeah.
Like if I'm the last person at 23 who's coming right into industry, then something is wrong, right? But I think a lot of students, especially at schools like Princeton and maybe other places, we feed into the idea that we need to be immediately successful. We need to exit and immediately, like, the world has to fall on us. I've learned, and really valuable lessons being at my job for the past few months, that, hey, like, you got to earn your stripes and you have to learn things the hard way and you have to put in the work and it will come, but trust, as you always say, trust the process. Right.
Right.
So I hope like listeners understand that too.